It is part of human condition to always see the greener grass. A major complaint that GTA 4 has faced during its lifetime was that players were sick and tired of the concrete jungle of Liberty City. Even though a country section was initially planned to complement the city portion, it ended up being scrapped in favor of other features and game concepts. Some of this criticism was fair for what it was worth. However, oddly enough, no one ever had an issue with driving physics in GTA 4, going as far for the community to actually admit at the time the driving was crazy realistic. Up until GTA 5 got released. All of a sudden, the forums were flooded by downcast people who jumped at the opportunity to defend their shiny little new toy. And even though the driving physics engine is pretty much the same between both games, a clear shift on what kind of player Rockstar was trying to please made itself pretty obvious. Now, I don't intend to bullshit you and claim that GTA 5 wasn't the masterpiece that it was, but for some reason or another, some people just don't seem capable to fathom the concept that their new game can be a victim of downgrades, or qualities that lose to its predecessor. So allow me to tell you why, objectively, GTA 4 had one of the most realistic, and by extension, funnest, driving physics in the whole Grand Theft Auto series, and perhaps of any other open world game, even to this day. Now, I'm sure you're dying to hear me talk about those hyper-realistic driving physics in GTA 1. I'm sorry, I didn't mean hyper, nor realistic. It could be summarized to a block of cubes, drifting around your low-resolution CTR screen, where sense of speed was primarily achieved with camera tricks and a light form of scrolling background. But to be fair, that's all we could do in 1997. I mean, have you seen how we designed titties in that time? Yeah, we pretty much used the pyramids of Giza for that one. Even if it does seem like a very infant time for gaming, this era was already marked by very impressive car games that could be classified as our earliest versions of any kind of thing that would even remotely resemble a simulator. In fact, Gran Turismo debuts itself in 1997. It was already pretty advanced in physics, as this 3D game would actually fairly represent what would happen if we insisted in entering a corner at excessive speed and brake late, and essentially trigger what is called understeer, where the wheels go like this, but the car goes like that, turning you into a wall decoration. But even if it's apparently not relevant, it was oddly important for this GTA game to have a solid driving experience. Because against what many may believe, GTA didn't actually start as a GTA. The original concept was actually called Race and Chase. Not A-N-D, just an N, because that's how fucking cool we were in 1997. We had no time for words. As it is spoiled by the title, the game could be perceived as a early day version of Hot Pursuit, where you could either control a criminal or a cop, where both sides would be pitted against each other in reckless, high-speed chases around Liberty City, Vice City, and San Andreas. Although technically it wasn't a purely racing game, the whole premise was surrounded in the fun of running over pedestrians and other cars off the road. Considering its 2D plane, it's hard to provide an immersive and realistic system, especially when you pile up the limitations in technology of the time. Sure, Gran Turismo can do that, but that's because the game was entirely designed exactly for that. A pure racing game with a high budget from Sony, of course. Yeah, sure, you could have different cars with different max speeds in GTA 1, different cornering ability, physical attributes like the length of the vehicle, all that. But there wasn't much you could do to differentiate and provide a different challenge when all cars handle pretty much the same in a very primitive manner. When you lack a whole dimension, it's hard to create things like rollovers that are immensely dependent on cars' height and center of mass. There was no perception of weight whatsoever, no weight, no traction, or even suspension dynamics. And collisions would simply be represented in the form of bouncing off walls or spinning out. And this trend followed pretty much into the end of the millennium, with GTA London 1969, London 1961, and GTA 2's experiences still being pretty much equated to that car floor mat that apparently all of us had when growing up. But with the new 1,000 years came a new age. With GTA 3 in 2001, we get introduced to a whole new reality. In order to give you some perspective on how massive a third dimension would be for a GTA title, I can challenge you to try to imagine a new color. Yeah, to be able to deliver that in a game allowed for the whole industry to engage in a completely unrestricted playground of innovation. Roads had elevations, cars now had a height clearance making you not be able to pass through some areas if they're low enough, collisions could actually make cars fly off the pavement and lose traction, and the impact of weight could finally be properly visualized. Rollovers were now a strong possibility if you decide to drive like your Paul Walker. Dude, the first time I decide to improvise, I say that shit. That was a terrible choice of words. Okay, cut this, please.
No, I don't think I will.
Now, opposed to the physics ragdoll engine used by Rockstar, which is a third-party licensed product made by a company called Natural Motion, I have a super interesting video about it, check it out. The actual driving physics engine was made in-house, like a homemade bowl of mom's spaghetti. Knees weak. In fact, not only the engine is full-on proprietary and developed by Rockstar, it is also the very same engine that we witnessed in Race and Chase days. That's as wild as learning that the Helldivers 2 engine is also the exact same one as the first Helldivers game, where the first game was also pretty much a top-down view. It makes no sense for it to be the same engine, but it is. Now, the actual name for these driving physics, or any car-related physics for that matter, is pretty much unknown, or at least undivulged. Surely a project name must exist, but that is probably locked away in a vault, protected by the Rockstar overlords. Why am I kidding? The Rockstar cybersecurity is as tight as fucking oversized jeans. What we do know is that it is inserted into the motherlode of engines that keeps other smaller engines, called Rage, Rockstar Advanced Game Engine. And even if the engine is the same, Rockstar had to spruce up the physics for GTA 3. I would also like to clarify that yes, there are some fans that speculate that Rockstar decided to try and tinker with a third-party based engine first, called Bullet Physics. This can technically be a possibility. Rockstar was not always the deep pocket sugar daddy that it is today. So back when they were DMA design, saving budget would be quite appealing and quite necessary actually. So messing around with an open source technology seems like an obvious first step, as many companies usually do in their genesis. However, due to the lack of documentation of the patented Rage technology, we can't say for a fact that that was the case, or even if they were inspired in the first place by the engine. But when you compete to deliver the most realistic physics engine in any regard, driving or not, you're bound to create some homogeneous behavior amongst engines. The standard is pretty much the same. It's real life, you can't do more than that. So yeah, GTA 3 was huge. It had to obviously change the way cars behaved in a brand new three-dimensional world. But throughout the years, these driving physics were still seemingly a gimmick. Cars wiggled, reacted to terrain accordingly, but it felt like you were driving a whole brick. Crashes carried no kinetic energy, or momentum, whatever you want to call it, bouncing you off of walls like you're made of rubber, which is not realistic at all. And this situation didn't pretty much change all throughout the 2000s, or at least the early ones. Very little evolution was noticed between GTA 3, GTA Vice City, GTA San Andreas, and all its variants. Vehicles still felt like they were behaving like they were part of a two-dimensional world when it came to the regard of enjoyable driving. And alongside with that, a challenge too. I don't think I've ever met anyone who says they love driving in GTA San Andreas. It's just not a thing. Not to mention that the cars behaved very weirdly upon crashes, making races kind of dull and feeling more like a chore. Simply a mission that you wanna speed run instead of speeding through, if you catch my drift. Damn, 3 car puns in a row? I'm hot, dude. But players only felt how truly challenging driving physics can turn your driving experience in the breach of the HD universe. This, ladies and gentlemen, this is where the fun begins. You can't make such a monumental transition into a new universe without reshaping pretty much every aspect of your video game franchise, regardless if those are for the best or for the worst. You gotta impress and turn heads. Balls to the wall, as I would like to say. As it was released in 2008, GTA 4 aimed to do precisely just that. The story was deep, meaningful, physics now behaved dynamically, combat was different. But how did driving evolve? Well, this might be the most divisive discussion ever since the inclusion of pineapple in pizza. GTA 4 focused on a very fundamental driving principle that would differentiate it from the past titles: suspension and weight. Cars already reacted dynamically, I guess, in a certain way to terrain change, but not to the extent where each axle, each wheel would individually react differently to gravity, g-force, and impact. And I know gravity and g-force are very much connected, but whatever. Not just visually, but also how the car actually turned, accelerated, and stopped. This involved a level of modularity within car models that wasn't present in earlier days. They were not just going to be a single object, but rather an object composed of multiple parts, as a car in real life is. Added to this, the new car damage engine that was implemented in GTA 4 could change vehicle attributes as your vehicle interacted with the game's environment. What this fundamentally means is that at every crash, at every bad landing, your car could get permanently deformed in a way that it would affect the car's responsiveness and ability to drive as expected. A heavy hit on your back fender could result in your rear axle getting deformed to the point of making your car's left rear wheel, for example, to drag instead of rolling, making it possible for the first time in the franchise to render your vehicle undrivable or barely drivable. This was a game changer, as we were never capable of damaging a car in such a specific, targeted way that would demand for a new driving strategy. Maybe turning left is no longer a possibility for you. And technically, we would never have a car driving the exact same way ever, as different crashes, different cars, different speeds and weights would make it practically impossible to duplicate the same changes and therefore the same car behavior. Kind of like a fingerprint, it was never going to be the same. And circling back to the whole suspension principle thing, a crucial argument that I would like to bring up, and many seem to ignore or not even consider in the first place, is that opposed to other GTA games like Vice City and San Andreas, GTA 4 wasn't a period piece. What I mean with this is that GTA 4 was not depicting a bygone era, but rather portray the current era of its release. It was supposed to represent a gritty New York in the late 2000s, meaning the pool of existing cars would follow suit. Some of you youngsters might not remember, which would make sense, some of you weren't even born, I guess. But the 90s and 2000s were marked by the production of big and bulky bathtubs on wheels, similar to what we've seen ever since the 1950s. Nothing special there, only that now we decided to upgrade the suspension systems without necessarily reshaping the whole car structure itself. And we also, for some reason, decided to make them taller, which in hindsight was not a great idea, as this made the cars extremely top heavy, with most of his mass loading the top part of the car, but now with an increased car ride suspension. That's an explosive mix, like jalapeno on Indian food explosive. I mean, look how 2000s cars actually behave during the Moose test that is designed to test turning at high speed. These cars looked spongy. They were supposed to be spongy. This didn't affect every car in the 2000s, of course. However, it is usually a factor that many players don't even consider when comparing driving physics between a recent title like GTA 5 and GTA 4. This brought an obvious increase in difficulty when it came to handle these vehicles, especially considering the confines of the grid-like structure of Liberty City, where every turn is essentially 90 degrees. This is the first aspect that both lovers and haters bring up when describing GTA 4's driving physics engine. It's incredibly realistic. That was Rockstar Games' imperative with GTA 4, as no GTA before achieved such a demanding level of realistic detail. It was its main appeal after all, since we had a smaller map, or at least a more urban, dense type of city, I guess. It just didn't feel as expensive. No flying vehicles, no deserts, no forests, no military installations. There was nothing like we've seen in past titles like in GTA San Andreas. This realism made everything harder. Braking became more of a planned mechanic rather than an afterthought. Smacking into walls wasn't a steering assist anymore, like this is a NASCAR or something. You couldn't turn a tight curve at 70 miles per hour when driving your mom's SUV, as if the damn car was on rails. Driving off-road actually slowed you down. Hell, you could even tip over from simply smacking the rims into a curve with a weird angle. In short, you had to learn how to drive, and not just floor to the max like a chimp on a bike. I know a main point for many is that realism is cool and all, but too much of it kills the buzz. That impedes the fun of driving. Well, allow me to twist that perspective of yours and explain why realism can actually make it even more fun by showing you the complete opposite of realistic. In 2013, Rockstar Games was conflicted between making another realistic masterpiece or a more casual experience that could attract even the most inexperienced gamers. After all, GTA is not supposed to be a simulator or a Souls-like game, even though CJ would have been an amazing tarnish, but... So for GTA 5, Rockstar Games made a bunch of compromises, starting with a clear downgrade of the usage of Euphoria dynamic ragdoll physics, a sillier story,
but I did kidnap his wife! Oh no!
And simplified controls. Alongside, vehicles were adjacently affected, not only in the way that they were controlled, but also in the way that they behaved. You would say that's obvious, since 2013, the pool of period-appropriate cars changed as well. Well, not quite. The gap is nowhere near noticeable, yet we had domestic cars behaving like actual racing cars, where not a lot changed ever since 2008, at least not when regarding the vehicle models and car types that Americans would mostly use in a city like Los Angeles. Vehicle modularity was still there, but it didn't serve as much function. Suspension was ridiculously dumbed down, as driving off-road on a $100,000 sports vehicle was as effortless or even faster than a specialized off-road truck. The damage engine was also unduly downgraded, where crumple zones diminished in detail, and in specific cases of GTA Online vehicles, the most recent ones, straight up stopped existing. Rockstar was not designing crumple zones or any kind of visual damage on these vehicles. You had to pray for your axles to get broken, and if they did, driving was still a manageable task. Vehicles will no longer be affected by bad driving or environmental influence. Furthermore, and maybe the most outlandish example of GTA 5's sins when it comes to this new driving physics engine, even crappy station wagons glued to the ground, not losing traction as they should, as if ground effect was a thing for these rust buckets. For those unaware, ground effect is when extremely fast cars like F1 cars have such immense downforce underneath the chassis that essentially glues the car to the ground, or even a ceiling if you are going fast enough. I don't think I have to explain how ridiculous that concept is for cars that look like this. You're not supposed to zooming through Los Santos like you're Lewis Hamilton in a car where the AC doesn't even work properly, as if it could go anywhere fast enough to create the negative pressure necessary to do such feat of engineering. The only negative pressure this car will be doing is to convince you to buy it. This was something that was recognized more and more, as players regained a sense of post-nut clarity that these cars seem way too grippy for the wavy roads of Los Santos. Braking was ridiculously overpowered, car classes began not to matter, as most cars behaved the same, almost like we were playing Race and Chase all over again. Acceleration became almost instant, but then max speed was weirdly capped at a measly 140 miles per hour, give or take, making the window of enjoyment oddly short for some reason. Rims stopped being an actual object, it didn't feel like they belonged in a car or they were made of the same compound of the tire, making curbs not an obstacle anymore. In fact, somehow, curbs actually make you faster in this game. What the fuck? It was a mess. And also, even though this is not really driving physics per se, they also decreased the traffic population in such a manner that provided less challenge or even a necessity for you to weave through traffic. And listen, people, I am all up for trading realism for fun, I really am. But does this seem fun to you? I have seen fans defend that GTA 4 cars were needlessly way too hard to drive. Too realistic, hence not fun. But I'm supposed to believe that holding down the throttle button for long minutes with no steering adjustments or very minimum, no consequences for stupid decisions, is fun? For some reason, this linear and simplified scheme of controls and form of physics turned driving in GTA 5 into a mere action as a means to an end, just to get to the waypoint and that's it. I mean, this was pretty obvious that that's what the average player wants, as we got flying bikes that literally go from A to B in a straight line. Nobody cares to drive anymore, because the game doesn't push you to drive. It's just brainlessly drive and drive, don't think, just drive. Seriously, my brake button is rusting. Although, to be fair, if we do consider GTA Online, amazingly, Rockstar has included some exceptional new driving physics when they officially absorbed the 5M Team CFX last year. But what's that? Is that realism saving the day? As a 5M team carried the same driving physics that were developed in realistic drifting servers into the actual GTA Online servers. Within a selective group of cars, you are allowed to install a drift setup that will turn your wheels into bars of soap, but in a deliberate way to achieve actual drifting. When Rockstar Games tried this before the purchase of the CFX team, well, it's sad to think that this, whatever that is, they call it drifting. With these new driving physics, players found themselves having to actually control their throttle, feather the brake, and even use the handbrake if needed. So despite the protests from GTA 5 fans, the 5M team, responsible for the biggest role-playing platform of all gaming, honestly, essentially used realism to fix GTA Online, or at the very least the driving physics, in a small portion. So to a certain extent, I guess we have to agree, maybe realism can in fact be fun. One of the most downloaded mods for GTA 5 is a mod that modifies the handling.dat files to create a driving experience that mostly resembles GTA 4, where dirt actually makes you slower or slidier if you're not using the adequate car, and overall is just more difficult, where obstacles actually feel like an obstacle on your suspension system. And it's curious how GTA 4's very own handling mod surely did fix some shortcomings of the game, but it doesn't make it feel more like GTA 5. There's no mod that apparently dumbs down GTA 4 physics to match GTA 5, and that happens for a reason. So yes, you should lose control for speeding in a corner. Yes, you should roll over your car and not be able to recover it if you smack into low objects. And yes, you should lose races if you make a catastrophic mistake. That is called consequences to a bad decision. The same way that sprinting towards the enemy with no cover is gonna get you shot. There has to be some form of challenge at the very least. I mean, no one expects a simulator level engine, but it should ask for the minimal trace of skill, don't you think? For a game so reliant on vehicles, it's funny to realize that we still haven't gotten any information regarding driving physics for GTA 6. We've seen the possibility for a new inventory and weapon system, advanced vehicle modularity and customization, hair physics, ass physics, but we haven't been able to learn anything about how driving in GTA 6 will feel or look like, both when analyzing the trailer that was released in December of the last year, or from the leaks from 2022. Or rather, we did, but it was in such a primitive state that made Race and Chase look like next gen. What we do know is that no matter how stubborn Rockstar Game is, they're not allergic to change. Take the Euphoria engine as an example. As players realized that Rockstar had to knock back a little bit on it when they had to insert it into the Rage engine of GTA 5. In order to accommodate to a much bigger world than GTA 4 ever was. Still, players rightfully complained. And for the new installment of Red Dead Redemption 2, Rockstar made sure to develop a system that would be more receptive to a complex physics engine without sacrificing a vast open world by combining both GTA 4 and GTA 5 Euphoria engines, instead of insisting in a restrictive balance between innovation and playability. The evolution in technology made this possible, and it's crazy to think Rockstar couldn't cook up something special with this new generation of consoles and hardware. Ideally and evidently, this is a personal note, but I would think that a balance between GTA 4 and GTA 5 driving physics would be the sweet spot, because GTA 4 was not perfect entirely. The suspension can still be perceived as too wobbly at times, exaggerating in the amount of G-force that would be exerted in one side of the car, and making them suspension arms look like they're made of jello. However, the goofy-ass traction from GTA 5 has to go. Fuck out of here. This is not driving, this is not fun, this is a purely mindless mechanic. We shouldn't have to study downforce, negative pressure and all that crazy shit, but you should have to know that flooring it through a tight turn will result in wrapping a car around a palm tree. I want to feel like a better player if I know how to use the controller better. I can't believe people care about KDs in GTA Online, where combat is summarized to roly-polies with laser guns. That is if you catch a GTA Online player on his feet. But asking for a more competitive driving physics engine is a blasphemy. Don't at me. I'm not a dance donkey here. I don't want or even expect my preferences to supersede the will of millions. But I know by evidence that I'm not the only one who feels like this, as thousands of players already were bothered to the point of expressing their disappointment in a new system as well. So at most, all I can ask is for a compromise. To still have a satirical, silly GTA game, but one that doesn't make me vegetate on a gaming chair by just letting my finger get stuck to the R2 button. A little bit of challenge is always fun. Realism doesn't have to equate boredom. You just gotta do things proper.